There's a certain scent that can still take me back, a sweet, artificial cloud of lime and sugar, the sound of women laughing, and the clink of ice in tall glasses, the unmistakable smell of a 1950s afternoon. It was a time when the world was painted in pastels, and the biggest worry for any housewife was whether her Jell-O mold would hold its perfect, shimmering shape. Ours was a street of neat lawns and neat lives, where every front door was unlocked, and every secret was politely ignored. I was just a boy then, more interested in my baseball cards than bridge club gossip, but even I could feel the unspoken rules that held our little universe together. You kept your grass cut. You kept your car washed. And you never, ever asked why sweet old Miss Henderson behind us had a garden overflowing with monkshood and castor bean plants, flowers so beautiful and so deadly. My mother, Helen, lived and died by those rules. Her reputation was built on two things: her impeccable kindness and her legendary emerald green lime Jell-O mold. It was a thing of beauty, quivering on a cut glass plate, studded with tiny marshmallows and a hidden layer of cream cheese and crushed pineapple. It was the crown jewel of every church social, every PTA meeting, and especially her weekly bridge game. Those afternoons were her opera, her battlefield. The other women, Betty, Margaret, and our neighbor, Eleanor, would arrive in a whirl of perfume and pearl necklaces, their smiles as perfectly set as their hair. And I'd watch from the stairwell, seeing the way my mother glowed when she presented that mold, the way the ladies would gasp with delight. It was her masterpiece. It was her armor. The first incident was treated as a tragic, but isolated, accident. Betty's husband, Frank, a large, jovial man who always gave me a quarter, was found dead in his basement workshop. The doctor, a friend of the family, called it a sudden, massive heart attack. It was shocking, of course. The whole street brought over casseroles, their faces etched with a polite, distant sorrow. But life, in its orderly way, went on. The next week, the bridge club met again. The laughter was a little more subdued, the colors a little less bright, but my mother's Jell-O mold was there, a familiar green beacon of normalcy. I remember seeing Eleanor, our quiet neighbor, take a second helping. She always seemed so sad, so fragile, a little bird of a woman with eyes that held a universe of regret. She'd look at that mold with a kind of reverence. The second death shattered the illusion for good. Margaret's husband, George, collapsed mowing his lawn, just 2 weeks after Frank passed. Two men, from the same small circle of friends, felled by sudden heart failure. That's when the whispers started. That's when the polite smiles at the grocery store began to feel strained. A darkness had seeped through the pristine cracks of our suburbia. My father, a pragmatic man, started locking the door at night. And my mother, she stopped making her Jell-O. She'd just stand in the kitchen, staring at the empty mold, her hands trembling. The investigation was official now. The police came, asking quiet questions, their notebooks looking obscene against the floral wallpaper of our living room. They exhumed both bodies. And what they found was unthinkable. It wasn't a heart attack. It was a poison. A rare, brutal toxin. The world turned upside down. The police focused on the bridge club. The food. The tea. My mother was questioned for hours. I'd never seen her cry before, but she did then, great heaving sobs that shook her entire frame. She was a suspect. The maker of the deadly dish. Our house, once a haven, became a prison of suspicion and fear. I hated it. I hated the policemen with their hard eyes, and I hated the way our friends' cars would slow down as they passed our house. But most of all, I was terrified for my mother. Because a part of me, a small, awful part, wondered if they were right. I'd seen her pride in that recipe. I'd seen the power it gave her. Was it a power she would kill for? The break in the case didn't come from the police. It came from me. Bored and anxious one afternoon, I was kicking a ball against the back fence when it sailed over into Eleanor's immaculate garden. I dreaded retrieving it. She'd been so reclusive since the deaths. I crept through the gate, expecting to be scolded. But her back door was slightly ajar. And I heard it, a sound so utterly out of place it froze me in my tracks. It was the sound of my mother's voice. She was in Eleanor's kitchen, and she wasn't visiting. Her voice was low, fierce, and cracked with an emotion I couldn't name. "You have to stop this, Eleanor. You have to tell them. It's gone too far." My blood ran cold. I pressed myself against the siding, my heart hammering against my ribs. Eleanor's voice replied, a faint, watery whisper. "I can't, Helen. Don't you see? It was the only way. He was going to leave me. After all these years of nothing, he was going to run off with that secretary and leave me with nothing. The shame would have killed me faster than any poison." There was a long, terrible silence. And then my mother spoke again, her voice softer now, filled with a heartbreaking weariness. "So you used my recipe. Every week. You asked me for a portion to take home to Harold, saying how much he loved it. You used my Jell-O, my friendship, to hide your poisons." She didn't deny it. The truth hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Eleanor, the victim's wife, was the killer. She had been poisoning her own husband, piece by piece, serving him my mother's beautiful, deadly creation. Frank's death was a mistake, a terrible miscalculation. He had come over unexpectedly for a tool, and Eleanor, flustered, had offered him a plate of the Jell-O meant for her husband. She never meant to kill two men. Just the one who betrayed her. The police were called. Eleanor was taken away, not in a dramatic struggle, but quietly, her head bowed, a blanket over her shoulders. The story made national headlines, a sordid tale of betrayal and murder in a perfect post-war suburb. But the headline never captured the real story. The real story was what happened after. The real story was my mother. She was cleared, of course. The community knew she was innocent. But something in her had broken. The trust was gone. The joy of cooking, of hosting, of creating something to be shared, it had all been poisoned, just as surely as that Jell-O mold. She never made it again. The cut glass plates sat in the cupboard, gathering dust, a relic of a time we could never get back. It took me years to understand her silence. It wasn't just the horror of what happened. It was the burden of a secret she chose to carry. You see, the police never asked, and my mother never volunteered, why she went to Eleanor's house that day. She went because she knew. She had known for weeks. She had noticed the way Eleanor's hands shook when she took the extra portion. She had seen a strange, powdery residue on her kitchen counter one day after Eleanor had been over, helping her clean. My mother, the keeper of all domestic secrets, had pieced it together. She went to confront her friend, not to accuse her to the police, but to beg her to stop. To find another way. To offer help, not condemnation. She went out of love, a complicated, painful love for the woman who had been her friend, and for the perfect, fragile world they had built together. She wanted to save Eleanor, even from herself. That's the memory that stays with me now, so many decades later. Not the sirens, or the headlines, or the shocking twist. It's the memory of my mother, years later, standing at that same cupboard. She opened the door, looked at that dusty glass mold, and she didn't cry. She simply reached out, ran a finger over its edge, and smiled a small, sad smile. She looked at me and said, "We never really know what secrets are hidden behind a smile, do we? We never know what recipe someone else is following." She closed the cupboard door. And she never opened it again. She understood that the true poison was never in the Jell-O, it was in the silent suffering, the desperate choices made behind closed doors in a world that demanded perfection. Her legacy to me wasn't a recipe, but a profound understanding that nostalgia isn't about the past being perfect. It's about remembering the people, in all their flawed and complicated glory, who lived it, and the love that sometimes means letting a secret rest in peace.